Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues. With this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on Episode 8 of the anime series Log Horizon 2. And this episode was all kinds of amazing and badass. In effect, we're seeing Akatsuki and the 24-25 other, adventurers in Akibahara. They've closed off this entire section of the city and turned it effectively into a raid zone. There's a curfew in effect, and all the people who are not going to be participating are being kept out of the area. So Emhart Nelreth, this roving serial killer murderer, who's super powered and everything like that, cannot, have his stats buffed just being in the presence of other adventurers and such like that, which is usually the effect, because he is powered by the same sort of, magic circle, if you will, underneath the city that powers the knights that come down and stop any potential fights and things like that within the zone. This is supposed to be a safe zone for all intents and purposes. So to twist it into a raid zone, in effect, is absolutely awesome. And then, of course, you have all these characters working in tandem. They've broken up into groups, very much along the strategizing Riaz and the other characters had postulated they would, need to do to take this guy down. But the primary crux of this episode is Akatsuki's personal journey to beat this guy, but also to attain a level of strength for herself. And one of the major aspects of the episode is her finally attaining her teaching, which I loved that it plays on her own, one of her own sort of, special skills, that being the hide shadow skill. As she's attacking Emhart Nelreth, she realizes she's got to go faster. She needs more speed, and she calls upon this power where all of a sudden in a split second it freezes her, and then a whole bunch of multiple ghostly forms of Akatsuki come out of the woodwork and start attacking Emhart Nelreth. And she gets a little blurb that pops up that says this is her new skill level, her teaching, Shadow Lurk, and it's all kinds of badass. Now, of course, right in that moment, you think she's basically got Nelreth cornered and she's about to take him down, but her sword gets stuck in his armor and she's flung against the wall. At this point, she basically gets a message from Tatara, the, armory runner forger, if you will, to come, meet her at a certain area in this little zone. And once Akatsuki does, it just gets that much more badass. Because in the last episode, I thought this character, Tatara, was gazing at a sword in her armory, basically in her stock, that she was thinking about using for herself, because the accompanying sword was the one that Nelreth is now carrying, and she felt guilty for that. But in fact, did she take this sword, the screaming sword, Haganamushi, and reforged it, shrinking it down in size, making it the Haganamushi Tatara, and giving it to Akatsuki in effect, so that Akatsuki could use this sword as one of its chief values, is that it can depower other opponent weapons. And so the merry chase is on, where basically Nelreth is just cracked. He's completely overtaken at this point by the flavor text and mythology within the game that, attributes to his weapon and such like that. And we see that basically Lanessia and Henrietta have been talking to the Kuni clan representative about taking down the magic circle underneath the city that fuels his armor and all this kind of stuff. And basically there's this odd moment where the Kuni clan member's like, it's a debt that we have to repay, this is our doing and such like that, but then he kind of turns away and says there's someone else he'd rather pay the debt to, whatever that means. But I did find it interesting that Lanessia, much as Akatsuki did herself, found the courage through the help of Henrietta to basically face her fear of shutting down this magic circle, which is essentially what protects the border around the city from outside incursions and also, battles taking place within the zone and all this kind of stuff. But for all intents and purposes, it's taken down. We have Riaz standing on the top of a building where they've cornered Nelreth. He's about to do this final, move against Akatsuki, and she basically unleashes this freezing line, or this ice spell, which completely just casts him in crystallized ice. And that's when Akatsuki sort of nonchalantly goes up. She climbs to the top, she takes her blade, and she carves his blade into so many pieces, thus having defeated Nelreth once and for all. And I love in the tail end of this episode, of course, the sort of comical aspect of Henrietta losing her crap over everyone's having a pajama party to celebrate and all this kind of stuff. People are celebrating out in the streets, having a party. And then there's this little message we overhear from Sujiro where he's talking to Shiro, apparently, marveling at the strength of all these women and everything like that. And you almost get the gist, maybe Shiro knew this was going on and he didn't come back to intervene because he wanted all these characters to unify without maybe his having to be there to moderate it and everything like that, like he has in the past. He wanted them to find the strength within themselves, I guess, is where I'm going with that. And of course, it's a surprise to Akatsuki to actually finally hear hear from Shiro himself, who congratulates her, and he wasn't supposed to use the telepathy to call her, to contact her, and she ribs him about he being the only one who can break his own rules and all this stuff. So it's like it amounts to pretty much a happy ending, but of course we have a tip of the hat back to Shiro's own raid that he's had ongoing, and I guess we're to take from this, because he says they're about to try it again, that in fact he had been beaten, he had fallen, as we saw Akatsuki had that little meeting with him in sort of the afterlife, or the between realm, whatever you want to call it, before they respawn in a healing zone. And so I guess that answers the question whether that was Shiro or not. And apparently, they had failed in their attempt, and they're going to be making another attempt, and we're going to see the story shift back to them, I'm guessing, in the next episode. So I couldn't be more excited. This episode was all kinds of badass. Akatsuki at the forefront, just being the most kick-ass chick within this series, and all kinds of awesome this episode was. So otherwise, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of this episode if you've seen it. And so, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video and that it finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.